Sea Otter, don't let his cuteness fool you. Hello lovely YouTube family, welcome back to Curiosity Lounge. In today's video we are going to talk about Sea Otter, don't let his cuteness fool you. Before we start, hit that red subscribe button so that you never miss out on any of our videos. Sea otters, similar to all homeotherms, must strike a balance between conserving body heat in cold environments and dissipating heat when internal production exceeds need. This process is particularly sensitive in the high latitudes where water is cold and heat loss potential is high, and when a relatively inflexible insulator such as air is used. The small size of the sea otter magnifies the heat loss problem because of a high surface area to volume ratio. One way to offset high heat loss is through the generation of additional internal heat. The sea otter accomplishes this through a metabolic rate 2.4 to 3.2 times higher than predicted in a terrestrial mammal of similar size. This elevated metabolic rate requires elevated levels of energy intake. As a result of this increased energy requirement, sea otters consume 20 to 33% of their body mass per day in food. In northern latitudes, sea otters may haul out more frequently during the winter as a means to conserve heat. Although air is a more efficient insulator than blubber, 10 millimeters of sea otter fur is approximately equal to 70 millimeters of blubber. The fur requires high maintenance costs and does not readily allow heat dissipation that may be required following physical exertion. To maintain the integrity of the fur, up to several hours per day are spent grooming, primarily before and after foraging, but also during foraging and resting activities. To dissipate excess internal heat and possibly absorb solar radiation, the sea otter's hind flippers are highly vascularized and with relatively sparse hair. Heat can be conserved by closing the digits and placing the flippers against the abdomen or dissipating by expanding the digits and exposing the interdigital webbing to the environment. Because air is compressible, sea otters likely lose insulation while diving and may undergo unregulated heat loss during deep dives. However, the heat loss may be offset to some extent by the elevated metabolic heat produced during diving. Sea otters occur in the near-shore habitat along the northwest Pacific coastline in areas that people have inhabited for millennia. In Chapter 11, Salomon et al. Addressed the First Nations Native American perspective on sea otter conservation. The authors delve into the historical views and use of sea otters by First Nations people to understand how sea otters were managed by Native people to inform contemporary ecosystem approaches to sea otter management in the modern world. They also argue that people coexisted with sea otters and the near-shore environment before contact with Europeans, and that the indigenous people effectively managed sea otter populations to maintain an optimal balance of near-shore apex predators and shellfish resources. Sea otters today often live adjacent to areas of high human occupancy. In some areas, their charismatic nature stimulates admiration and public concern for their protection. In other areas, there is concern about sea otter expansion and reintroductions since their high caloric requirements and the resulting impact on invertebrate prey, populations could potentially collapse and close significant commercial fisheries for crabs, clams, abalone, and urchins. Chapter 12 and 13 explore the complex relationships between people and sea otters, both positive and negative, as sea otters have experienced recovery and established interactions with humans. Sea otters in U.S. waters were originally distributed among Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and California. Populations in Oregon remain regionally extinct at this writing. The Federal Submerged Lands Act of 195320 was important to state jurisdiction over sea otter management. The act specified that submerged lands beneath navigable waters within 5.6 kilometers of the mean high tide line of the mainland shore were within the jurisdiction of the adjoining state, thus allocating to the states the authority to manage territorial waters and associated submerged lands by applicable state law. Sea otters possess thick layers of fur for warmth and protection, and thus grooming is part of their social structure, as with many social terrestrial mammals. Unlike other marine mammals, sea otters do not have subcutaneous fat. They must rely on keeping their underfur dry and therefore groom themselves repeatedly to spread waterproofing squalene oil over the surface of their fur. Sea otters in Alaska are suspected to have developed saxitoxicosis, although in experimental studies they avoided contaminated prey items. Clinical signs other than death and lesions were not documented. Domoic acid was suspected to be a major component of the southern sea otter UME in 2003. Prey vectors were thought to be mole crabs in some of the cases. CNS lesions are rarely seen, possibly because of the acute nature of the intoxication. When present, the targeted area of the brain appears to be the dentate gyrus and hippocampus, as in the sea lions. Domoic acid has been linked statistically to dilated cardiomyopathy in sea otters. That's all for today. I hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so that you never miss any amazing video from us.